So the next thing I want to do is start making it so that you actually focus on an area that I would actually want you to look. Because right now it's kind of like, where do you look, right? There's like 1,000 things going on. So let's start by going in, and this is true of all renderings. There's always going to be kind of like your base that you make. It could be like the rendering, or it could be like a photo collage like this. And you think about it, our building is only that little piece, but we've been doing all this work to kind of build the scene so that you kind of feel like what it's like to be there. What I'm going to start doing now is applying sort of effects on top. So just like before, we were adjusting the effects on the individual layers. Now if I just drop an adjustment layer, so let's say Hue and Saturation as an adjustment layer, I can affect the whole image or just one. So now I want to start blending the images together. So I always have a combination of a couple different effects I like using, but you can try and mix and match with whatever effects you like doing. I'm going to show you some of them that are super like fast and easy and have a huge impact on what the image actually looks like. And so you'll see, like, up to now everything we've been doing has been doing like little changes, and that's kind of the key, is no one thing will totally change the image, but as you start adding these little pieces, you start getting more and more and more. So I want you to kind of look through here, like where the trail is going and the house and then the two bikers. So I want everything else to start fading away. And you could do this by drawing like a white layer. So this is pretty common. I see this all the time. And people think that it will work because it's fast. So you could say, or even here, let's just invert it and draw with black. Oh, let's grab my normal brush. So some people do this and they go, look how like, and that's what they do. And they think just by doing one layer it'll ever do anything different than this. It just looks like you just put like glasses on that are frosted and you're looking through them. So rather than do that, let's actually start doing things that start guiding your eye a little bit more subtle than just throwing like a one filter over the top and expecting one layer to do all the work for you. So what happens is, if you don't understand like colors or definition or contrast, and you just blindly are throwing layers on, what ends up happening with your renderings or any drawing is you start accidentally drawing attention to areas of the image that aren't important, and then your eye goes over there, and then it's not even part of the building that you wanted someone to look at, and that's where people's eyes go, and they miss track of like what you're trying to communicate. So the easiest one that we can do is we can start grabbing, so I'm going to move this guy. I'm going to start losing the saturation, and what I'm looking at is the edges of my image. So see out here, like that's not really that important or way in the background, but in order for me to make the foreground come forward, I need to make everything else fade to the background. Does that make sense? So like things that are brighter and bolder will always kind of come forward, and then the same is true with warmer colors. So warm colors like your oranges and reds will always naturally feel like closer to the foreground, and then your blues and purples tend to fade to the back. So that's the basic part of color theory that you need to understand when you're doing your drawings. That warm will come forward, cool goes back, and then as long as you understand that and you start using those principles, you can really get a huge difference. Pretty simple. So watch this. So all I'm doing is desaturating a little bit and lightening a little bit, and I'm really looking around the edge because that's in the background, because that I'm going to leave exactly like this. Everything else I'm going to use the mask. Don't know why, I guess that one I did have there. I'm going to use the layer mask to start hiding the effect, which will reveal the image behind it. Does that make sense? So I'm going to grab black 20% with just a soft brush, and I want you to look here. So I'm going to start fading this back in. So I'm clicking where I want you to look and then dragging away from that, and then I let go of the mouse and I click again on the first spot and then drag in a different direction. Does that make sense? So since my opacity is 20, I can click the same pixel 5 times before it hits 100% opacity. So that gives you a lot of flexibility to fade it out. If you use a really heavy brush like 100, you'll see as soon as you click, it just appears. And then you move the mouse over there and there's no way you can smoothly control where someone would look. So it starts getting like really overpowering really fast. So here we can start putting a little bit back here. Maybe we bring this guy up. So here maybe we try and get this tree to come forward. So we can do some of this. So then my mask looks like this. So see, I'm just drawing really lightly with 20%. So here if I start drawing, that's what I'm going to do, is just kind of do like that. And then when you look at the image, that's what's getting drawn. So here I'm like revealing like where Bender is. And the trick is use a little bit of a bigger brush than you think so that it makes it a little softer. So the shack could be there. Maybe we do a little bit up here. But now look at the difference. Whereas that, see how intense everything is? And like your eye goes all over the place because there's a lot of interest. Now, just by doing that, look how easy we can guide you to look where we want you to look. And that's just one layer, getting rid of some color. And now we're using the layer mask just like we were before when we were doing this little thing where we're just chopping it off. Now we're using it on the effect. So that's why those adjustment layers are really useful, because you can apply like a real simple effect and then you control where that effect goes. And you'll see in like 3 layers we're going to transform this so it looks 1,000 times better. And it's like, why don't I always do that? So here I can give this a little bit going up, so we draw your eye down. And where I don't want people to look, like way in the back and in the corners, I'm not even going to like hide it at all. It's just going to be white. So see, like here, it's just like white there. Oops, I don't want to link that. The next thing I want to do is start bringing that dynamic range back, because now we adjusted the dynamic range on individual layers. Now let's make sure our whole image has a lot of pop to it, because it doesn't look like it, but this is a super gray image right now because we don't have the full range, especially after we did that whole desaturation and lightness thing. So now that we've kind of toned down the image and got you to see areas that are popping forward, now let's widen the range so that we actually see it all the way. So to do that, you can use levels or you can use curves. I showed you levels earlier, so I'm going to show you curves now. They work exactly the same way if you only look at the bottom. So if I grab this one and pull it over, see, like it's going to make the darks darker. This one will make the lights lighter. And if you just do that, it works the same way as the levels tool. So levels is, think of it as like a curves adjustment, but it's linear. So it's like a straight line. And if you look here, it is a straight line. So if you, it might be hard to see on my screen, but there's another line in the background that goes out of 45. That's what Photoshop is saying it's treating the values of those pixels. So if it's below that line, that means it's darkening these, and if it's above it, it's taking the value and making it lighter. So the cool thing with the curves is we can click on this, and now it doesn't have to be a linear exposure. You can start doing like a curved exposure or a logarithmic exposure. So we can pull down and make the intensity darker on the darks, or pull this up. I'm going to go crazy with this one here. So an S curve is what, if you wanted super contrast or to look like HDR, some people like this look and they do that all the time. But I typically don't go crazy with these. So what you want to do is pull the darks down a little, and then you can pop the whites tiny bit. Maybe it's already too much. And as you move, it updates, so you can kind of watch it and see if it looks good or not. So now with this layer, if you turn it on and off, see how gray that one looked? So we've brought back some of the information that we lost, but it's not this. So see that one, there's no way to know where to look. This one, it's really starting to pop down there at the bottom. Now another trick you can do is, remember I said color? the warm colors will come to the foreground, the cool colors go away. If we start right now, we haven't played with blend modes at all. So do you guys know how to use the blend modes? Yes, no? Are you experts? Okay. So the blend mode, right now every layer is set to normal, which is the default setting, which means if you have a picture of a phone and you put it in there, it's going to look like a picture of a phone. And it's not going to interact with any other layers. The only thing you could possibly do to it is fade it using the opacity and make it look lighter or darker. Once you start doing the blend modes, it's actually going to take the pixels of that layer and then interact with other layers. So, and then each different mode has a different interaction that happens. So some of them make images darker, some of them prioritize the highlights, some of them look for contrast, some are just color. And so you can have an image but not technically use the image as what it looked like. You just need it for the texture or for the color value that it had. And then this will let you do that. So what's really cool is if I get a solid color, and let's say I know warm colors help bring things to the foreground. So let me get like an orange, something like this. And if I leave it to normal, it's just going to look normal, right? I can't see anything. But now if I start going down, so you can darken, multiply. So I don't really want to do that to my image. I want to start looking at kind of like where I have like the contrast and stuff. So if you come down here to overlay, and we reduce this one way down, where if you turn it on and off, you can kind of tell what it does. But when you don't see it off, you don't notice it right away. So now what I do is hide it. So make your mask black, and then you bring it back only in the areas you would want someone to look. So see here, I can bring back some. And now what this is going to do is help kind of color that image. Before it was just one color. Now we're starting to kind of pick out areas that we like and really make them kind of pop. And since we're doing this across, we're starting to kind of contour the image so that areas that are of importance get more detail and stuff to them, and then other areas start getting like, you just kind of leave them, and since you're not affecting them with these adjustments, they kind of just go away. So like remember our background over here, which used to be super intense, like when we didn't do this, like now, like see that tree right there? The reason I didn't care that it was so bright was because I knew later on we were going to do this and it was just going to go away. So you can always, like, don't feel like you have to have the perfect image, perfect color, perfect everything, because it really doesn't matter when you're in it. Let's say we wanted Frank's little shack to be covered in like plants, like it looks like ivy's growing on it because it's been in the forest for so long. So how could we do that? So you could try and find like the perfect image of, what do I have selected? It won't let me zoom. That's weird. So if I wanted this to look like it's totally hidden by plants, we can use the trick that we did with our little squirrel where we hide it that way. And so we can go to the mask on this one and get a brush. Sometimes like the shortcuts stop working, and then if you close and minimize it, they come back. See, it's weird. So let's get this one like small like that. And if I switch, and then you start to, the trick is you want to use 100% opacity on something like this because it should just totally hide it. So see here, I'm just clicking and dragging up. Maybe we come down with some of them. And the trick is you want to kind of go around and not make it too obvious. Maybe over here there's some. And if it was getting too apparent, like where you had hit it, what we could do is make a copy of that layer. So see here, it's getting a little weird. So let's undo most of that. And now let's do a cool trick where we can use, so you guys ever use the stamp tool, clone stamp? So I'll show you a super hack on using the clone stamp, so that like everyone uses it to kind of like hide like a column or a sign or something, but you can use this to create. It's really good for like plants and to draw like your own. If you want to draw a tree or something like that. And the benefit with that is you can get it perfect to the way you would want it to look. So the first thing is, don't use the standard one. You can use like one of these, or like the little leaf one if you're trying to do like grass leaves. And then we want to sample. Let's make a new layer. Let's say I want to grab some of this. So I'm going to put it in front of this new layer. Oops. There. And then I just want some of this. Oh, here, I'm going to copy this anyway, so I don't need that. I want some of this material to drop onto there. So I'm going to grab something like this, like a big swatch of it. And then just hit Control J. That will copy it onto a new layer. So see here, I have this new layer now. Oops. So then this layer, what we can do with this, oh no, but it has all the effects on it. So let me delete that. So if you like, let me turn these off for a second. Let's say we like, well, we could use this up here. So the key with this stamp is you want to make it so that you don't recognize the source of what you're using. So here, once you start using the stamp, you first Alt and click where you want it to start sampling from. So think of, if you think of the way a normal brush works, it's going to draw with whatever tip you give it, right? So if we drew that, it's going to draw at this size, at this opacity, and then the color it draws, you tell it right here. So think of this tool as exactly the same thing, except instead of sampling right here and just filling it with black, it will pull the color from wherever you tell it to start grabbing. So I'm going to hold Alt and tell it start sampling right here. And it's important that once you click, so oops, I don't have my stamp. So here, I set that as the source. So now notice how it's showing me like green there. So let me zoom in. As I start to click, you'll see a little icon appear over here, and that's where it's sampling from. So as I start doing this, see it's starting to draw it in. And the reason you can't see it is because I'm not. Oh, I'm behind the shack. So here, now we're actually seeing what we're doing. So let me move this guy over. Oops. There we go. So I don't like that. So stamp, start sampling like from here, and then here you can draw up like that here. And notice over there, if you keep sampling forever with the same source, eventually you just repeat the same drawing on the other side. So the trick is get a few lines in and then change the location of your sample so that it's not obvious. And keep in mind, if I want to click from here and drag down, you want to and I want this area, you're going to want to click right here with the sample so that as you start drawing down, it will grab the area that you liked. And you can grab some of that guy. Maybe It's got like a little one coming down here. So something like that is looking pretty cool. So you can also then grab, so a cool thing you can do with this, I only want to see this in here, so I'm going to mask that off. So right now it looks really flat because it literally is flat, right? We just copied an image. But if we do like a hue and saturation and we clip it down to just this layer, so see here, if I darken, it's going to do everything. I'm going to clip it. And now I want this side to be darker, right? Or some of the guys over here. So I can darken that pretty good. And then we can invert the mask. And now I can get my brush and start darkening some of these guys over here. I can do a few little ones in there, a few ones in here. Really darkening these ones up. And since it's only applying to that, that's the only thing it's darkening is some of these. So one thing I always keep in mind is like whenever you're drawing anything, you want to have like a light, like a medium tone, and then on one side it should have a highlight, and the other side should have like a shadow. So if you ever look at like the old like Renaissance paintings, stuff like that, they could make stuff look photorealistic, and they were just painting by hand. So there has to be a way you can draw it that way in Photoshop. So things like this tree, if you really wanted to make it look like it was in the scene and like lit up correctly, you could add on top of this like let's say I did hue and saturation for that, and I'll show you here. It doesn't matter which tool you use as long as you understand kind of consistently like what it is you're trying to do. So maybe we go here and then I crop it down to there. You invert the mask, and so which side should the light be coming from? We can grab a normal brush this time. This is like a soft thing, so maybe we go like 40. And if you want it to be like lit up on this side, we can do that. And then on the top of this branch, you can do the same thing to people to have them feel like they're in the scene. And then now this will feel like it's contoured and actually has like depth and it's in the scene rather than just being like a flat object. So that's the key to making something feel like it's there and not just a flat thing. So see there the difference that makes? And it's not like it's going to transform your scene, but that does help. We can do the same thing here like this little guy. So like if you want to go really into it. And then, so we have these guys all in it. So now as we start going through here, maybe we pull some of that warmth up to Frank's head. So we've got this in there, the shack looks all covered in leaves or whatever. And then, so this is looking good. We can actually add, so now let me see, we could, I had this dude jumping off like a big thing. I don't think I'll be able to fit that one. Oh, maybe this guy. So this guy could probably be jumping across the water or something. Oops. So this one I'll do fast. So I see he's here. So I mean, like a shortcut you could do is this first, and then we can zoom in on him. And then get rid of this. So I'm gonna use like 90. So I don't sit here all day. We can also give this guy like motion since he's in the air. So we can do a blur. So let me get this in a little tighter. So this is one of the reasons where if you know you're going to blur something, you don't need to get it anywhere near perfect, because you could spend like all day going in here and doing all this, but then once we blur it, it's going to shift where all these edges are, so you don't need to be right on them as long as you get rid of like the big differences. So then I've got that. I can go to, let's apply that. So if you go filter, oh, we can make a copy of them, so we have two. Oops. Control J. And I can go filter, blur. Since he's moving, I'm going to do a motion blur. And you kind of want to match this angle to the direction they're moving. So maybe he's going up a little bit. Something like that's kind of cool. And then if you click here, it'll show you that, and you can zoom in. And then the more you do it, like, you could be like an Olympic athlete, like going full speed, or you can kind of get some cool effects sometimes with a combination of like a crazy blur, and then if you left like the original one there and you move it behind it, and then you lower the opacity on the like real one so that he starts getting kind of blurred in some areas but not everywhere. And then if you wanted to get really creative, you could say like, oh yeah, his arm's moving more than his feet are pedaling, or you could rotate the tires. So you could do something like that. You can even lower that one. So now we have something that starts looking pretty good. We have the curves. Let me drop the curves on top and make sure this is looking decent. So we've got something like this now, where you're coming across the middle there. Let's say like we didn't like the color of the water and we wanted that to like be a little bit more blue. We can use the same trick we did with this one, where we add a solid color, and if we want some like blue into it, we can do this. So this is one way to do it. I'll show you, like, you can do it like 3 ways, and we set this one to only show here. So right now all I'm doing is just revealing that color. It's set to normal, so eventually, see, I'm just seeing like a weird blue and it looks super fake. But if you change it to overlay or one of these other ones, you can start getting, or you could do color, so it just looks at the color of this layer, and then we can always tweak this color to be like darker, or you can go in more like bluish. There's tons of stuff you could do with it. The other way you can do it is we can add a hue and saturation. So once we have this to where you like it and then it's done, you can save it. So say this save.